Welcome, everyone. This is Megan Mitchell, the founder of Agents of Change Social Work Test Prep. And for Social Work Month, we are excited to bring you another social worker from the field. Today, we are going to chat with Jalaycia Lewis, who's here with us today, and we're going to pick her brain and get some words of wisdom from her. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome her to our podcast. Welcome, Jalaycia.
Thank you so much, Megan. I am so happy to be here. Thank you to your team at Agents of Change. This is a great time and opportunity for us as social workers. As we know, we are celebrating National Social Work Month. So it's nice to be in the space of other social workers. I am Jalaycia Lewis. I currently am a senior program associate at Prosperity Now in Washington, D.C. I am the founder of the Social Recipe, which is essentially a community hub, a community platform for social workers, mental health professionals, and just the everyday person to get involved in the things that are going on in our communities. It's a safe space for us to talk about these things. And then in addition to providing different resources. So I'm so excited. I just graduated last year with my Master of Social Work. So, I'm a baby fish in the field, in the pond. But I just really am just so thankful and excited to continue to pursue social work and continue to pursue the things that interest me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I know that you do more of the macro side of social work.
Yes.
So I know that is a very popular area of social work right now. So
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how you decided to go the macro route and how you are doing that in your work in your current job and maybe with the Social Recipe?
Yeah, absolutely. So I first came across the term macro social work probably my senior year of undergrad. And when my professor introduced it, I was like, okay, this is different. This is weird. Because, throughout your program, you're taught, okay, you can do microservices where you are providing case management or, essentially you're not a therapist per se, you don't have your license, right? But you're just providing different tools and resources for people. And so, okay, I'm like, macro, this interests me. Like this is something I could do. And not to say I do wholeheartedly believe that micro and macros always intersected with social work. However, I knew that there was something different in the way I view things and in the way in which I help people, even before I found out what social work was, look differently, right? And so I knew that once I heard about it, did more research, I was like, okay, I'm going to pursue this. This is going to be my thing. However, I didn't realize that in the field, macro social work, it's beginning now, right? Like you mentioned, to be more recognized. And so I didn't at the time, there wasn't this notion of, okay, there was this notion of, okay, how do I make this work? What am I going to do? I'm preparing for graduate school. I have to look at programs. What programs are there that will assist me in this effort? And so thankfully, this was right when the pandemic hit. I applied for Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, which is an HBCU in Tallahassee, where I currently was, and was accepted. Their program is completely macro-centered, community-centered. And so I was able to study and develop those skills throughout that program, and which now have translated into my job currently and with the organization that I have founded. Really looking at things holistically. And, from that broad view, figuring out how to change, systems, what resources, how can we continue to collaborate to change, the things that we see that are issues. And with my job right now, currently, we're building financial equity. We're trying to minimize that racial wealth gap. And so those are the things that excite me about macro, doing macro work. And so, like you mentioned, it's becoming a huge thing. It's becoming popular. And I'm so glad it is. And I'm so glad to be a part of that population of social workers that are leading in that effort.
That's really exciting. So I graduated with my MSW in 2012. So a decade ago at this point, and there was the clinical track, and then there was a few macro track options. But I really, when I started, I thought I wanted to be in the policy track, but there was only 3 people in the whole program in the policy track.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I kind of talked myself out of it, but I think now I see, because I really do, I do clinical work in the schools, but I think that I do a lot of different work. I do micro, meso, and macro work. So I'm really happy to see that that macro piece is being integrated in a lot of ways into curriculum and into field placements, because I think that, like you said, they work so closely together and they build upon each other, and we can't have micro without macro. We can't have macro without micro.
Absolutely.
So it's just interesting in the past decade how things are really becoming more holistic, which I think is really what social work needs at this point and what's going on.
Agreed. Yes.
Awesome. So I know that you graduated not too long ago, but what is one lesson that you think you've learned either personally or professionally while working in the field?
So a lot of my friends last year who graduated, now, once again, we have our pandemic, things seem to be getting a little bit better, but also there's so much uncertainty. And so one of the things that I've learned was just talking to recent grads and, people who are a little bit more social workers who are seasoned in the field, is to advocate for yourself, right? We spend our livelihood advocating on the behalf of those that we serve, to different vulnerable populations. And then sometimes in the midst of that, we get lost, right? In the midst of that, we experience burnout. We as well are grieving, along with our the communities that we serve. And so one of the things that I've been picking up and learning is that, hey, we go through things too. We are people. That's my theme for this month. Social workers are people. Because sometimes people forget that. And so with our jobs, and the different spaces that we occupy, just remembering to advocate for myself and know that I'm not alone, that there are other, social workers who are going through and experiencing the same thing I am. And so, reaching out and talking, and in the midst of that, just trying to be sure that I take care of myself too, while taking care of others.
I think that's super important. And I actually have been following your page on social media, on Instagram. And I love that you're saying social workers are people. I think we know that as social workers, but sometimes our populations and others think that we're superheroes. And and it can be really, really challenging. So I've worked in schools for over 10 years, and I've been in person for the past 2 years. And oftentimes you hear teacher burnout. Teachers are 1000% burnt out, but also so are all school staff, including school social workers. So I sometimes think we kind of get forgotten in certain settings that we are also, like you said, people, and we're experienced, and we sometimes have that vicarious trauma or that secondary trauma because we're helping other people with their emotional load at this time. So yes, social workers are people just like everyone else. We have, our limits. We're pushed to our limits. We need self-care. We need times to decompress. And sometimes we need people to just lean on. So I think that's really important. And I think this month I've seen it so much. I'm so happy to see that self-care is really being promoted, and not just in the way like, get a massage or take a bath. Right. Like the very stereotypical ways that people think of self-care, but maybe like setting boundaries and putting ourselves first, I think is like a new way that people are looking at self-care. So I think that's
yes, I agree.
Awesome. So kind of building off of that's a lesson that you've learned. Is
Mhm.
there a tool or something that you use often in your social work practice that you would encourage other social workers to use or to look at?
So I know that a lot of times we are trying to find jobs, right? That's a
Mhm.
huge thing, okay. We know that we don't have to, we've accepted this position, we've done this job, and we're like, oh, I don't know if I like it, right?
Exactly.
And so for me, a big tool was idealist.com. I don't know if you've heard it.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, great. And so utilizing every job, right, is not on Indeed or Glassdoor. And so utilizing not only Idealist, but utilizing your resources and the network from your universities, from your institutions, just I don't know, people in the community really leaning into. I was talking to one of my friends, and I was telling her about my job search and how I even came across this position. And she was like, I really did not know that social workers could do things like that.
Mhm.
Like, seriously, we sometimes we in our minds we check this box, right?
Mhm.
Okay, we gotta, do this, and case management has to be et cetera. And with me one desiring to be a macro social worker, I applied for everything. I really didn't know who I wanted to serve, how I wanted to serve, but I knew that I would land somewhere, where I could grow. And so I would say, idealist.com, that's a huge platform. And then also like different boards, if like you want to move, like I'm moving to DC, looking up job boards and nonprofits, popular nonprofits there, to find, suitable jobs. And even you find a job and you're like, oh, I'm not really sure about this. I'm not really sure about the pay. Well, guess what? Negotiations, right? Never accept something that, you're not sure of, or that's not going to give you the life that you essentially want, so that you can live comfortably, because we deserve that, especially as social workers.
Absolutely. You hit on a lot of points that I've been thinking about as I have been interviewing people. I think similarly, the biggest professional tool for me is networking.
Yes.
And that's something that I didn't learn right away, and I wish I would have done more of.
Sure.
Is finding a network and staying in touch with them, because you don't want to get maybe 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, and someone could be a really good connection for you.
Right.
But you haven't talked to them in 5 years, and then you don't want to come knocking and saying, hey,
Right.
can we connect? So I definitely think networking and staying, in connection with your network. I'm very close with my previous supervisor and some previous colleagues. And even just a couple times a year we connect. Like, you don't have to connect all the time, but just check in, right? They're social workers too, and their colleagues, and just check in and keep up those professional connections. I think that's really important. Because you never know where your career will take you. So I'm glad that you said, like, try out a bunch of different things. Don't box yourself in. Because my journey has gone I've mostly been in schools, but I also have a degree in special education because I love education. Like, social work opens doors, I think. You don't want it to close doors, you want it to open doors. So
that's it.
Exactly. I think that's really good that you said just have an open mind. And know that we have so many diverse skills that could be applied to many different jobs, not just clinical case management. We can do something. Awesome. So obviously we are here, Agents of Change Social Work Test Prep. So the $1 million question is, how are you an agent of change?
So I would say that I'm an agent of change because the mode, right, that social workers, this narrative that people have concocted of what social work is or who social workers should be. Like, I've completely shattered that. And I'm not bragging. I'm just saying, like, no, like, this is not what we do. This is not, who we are as portrayed in the media. I'm an agent of change because I'm an innovator. I'm a visionary. Like, I see something And when I look at it, I'm like, okay, this is how we can make this better, right? And so being an agent of change is like, okay, we have a lot of people, right, who claim to be, okay, yeah, I'm changing this, I'm changing this for the better, right? But if you don't have the voice of the people, right, the voice of the people that you're actually trying to not change but assist in that change, then the cause is lost. And so that's something that's very huge for me, is having and being a part of those voices of the community. In Tallahassee, the social recipe was birthed in Tallahassee, and birthed out of a need for a safe space to vocalize frustration, right? And to vocalize the different things that were occurring during that time, and still to this day. And so, seeing that and being a part of that, I would say I've been able to utilize just my innovation, like the vision that I have and the skills that I've learned to really uplift and amplify those voices to work towards change.
Thank you for that. That's so important. It's such a powerful answer. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
I'd like to know a little bit more about the social recipe, how you thought this up, kind of your vision for it. It's really awesome work that you're doing. So I want to make sure we definitely highlight it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's so funny because in 2000, I actually started the social recipe in 2019. However, it wasn't called the social recipe. It was called a recipe to joy.
Okay.
And I asked someone, I was like, when you think about me, what are some things you think about? I had the recipe part. I just needed the last part. And they were like, well, you laugh, you smile, and oh, you're joyful. And I was like, okay, I like that. And so initially it began as a space for me to highlight what I was doing in social work, because, I didn't really see a lot of people, at least during that time, talking about social work. And so I started off with that. And then, of course, 2020, we had the pandemic, and then George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many other traumatic events occurring right in front of our eyes. And so I'm like, okay, this is hard. For me, it's definitely difficult to be vulnerable. And so I can only imagine, the difficult times that others were having. And so I'm like, okay, a recipe. When you think about a recipe, you think about mixing things together, bringing these different ingredients to create this whole, this plate, And so I'm like, okay, recipe, social. And I just combine them together, and with help, he will kill me if I don't credit him. With help from my brother-in-law, developed the social recipe. And essentially it is that dish. It is that hub of communities. At the time I was in Tallahassee. So that community, the capital of Florida, and what we were experiencing at that time is that dish and I'm not the ingredient, right? I'm not delivering any ingredients, right? It's the community. And so bringing those ingredients together to create that whole. So the social recipe was created, and since then it's been a ball. I've done different workshops, have led webinars, spoken to so many young girls and boys, and really it's just all about, like I mentioned before, amplifying voices. I don't have the voice. Yeah, I mean, I'm speaking, right? But the voice, I'm literally like a megaphone, and they're just shouting, these different things. And so I'm excited to continue to expand and grow. Like I mentioned, it's just a community organization right now. But I am looking towards expanding it and, filing some different things to just take it to a different level this upcoming year.
Awesome. So the last thing that we will leave with, and one last question before we wrap up, is so what would you tell people that maybe are like you, they want to get involved in their community and they want to make a difference? What advice or what can they do to even just get started?
So I would say for the first thing is understanding what you are passionate about. what is your philosophy? What is, because, you can't, it's going to, I'm not going to say you can't, but it's going to be difficult for you, to select something and do something if you don't know why you're doing it, knowing you, and you may not even understand the why, right? I completely did not understand the why, in 2020 when developing the social recipe. I didn't understand the why when, macro social work became, this huge, huge thing, as you mentioned a few years ago, and I'm trying to learn it and understand it. I didn't really fully understand the why, but I knew that this was my direction. Like I knew that this was my calling. And so, really, really understanding your passion and understanding how that passion could be aligned or how it could benefit someone else or another community, right? And so one of the things I'm passionate about is Black women, right? I'm a Black woman. So, one of the things that I desire to do or am aspiring to do is creating a safe space for Black women through the social recipe. So, whether that's going to be, okay, let's talk, let's have a conversation, let's do a webinar or whatever that case is, just being sure that my passion aligns with the community that I desire to serve. Because if they don't see you passionate, right? If they don't see that you care about them, and care about what it is you're trying to achieve and the place that you're trying to walk with them to, it won't matter, it won't really mean anything. So, definitely don't go with the popular trend or what you think everybody else is doing, really follow what your passion is, no matter how weird it may feel or how, impossible it may seem.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I think that passion is so important. Like you
Yes.
said, a lot of times people are like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do with my degree.
Yes.
And I think, I've been in the field for 10 years now, and it took me time to realize that educating people and educating people with learning differences is actually like something I'm truly passionate about. So your passion will come.
Yes, it will come.
It will come. And I think you could probably agree that when you find your passion, it comes so easily. Doesn't mean the days and the work are not hard, but it's something that you look forward to doing.
Yes. That's the key.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to thank you so much. You shared so much insight into macro social work. I loved hearing about the social recipe. So if any one of our listeners would like to follow along, you can follow the social recipe on Instagram. It is at the social recipe. This will also be shared. So you can follow the amazing work that is happening. But I wanted to thank you so much for your time. And thank you for, in Social Work Month, taking the time to share your knowledge with our community. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate this and appreciate this space that you are creating for social workers everywhere. So thank you.
Thank you.